XRP Whales just bought 72 million tokens in the last 24 hours. And the timing is what makes this interesting. Because while the market is still questioning XRP's price, the biggest holders appear to be doing something very different, accumulating. But here's the question that matters most. Are these whales preparing for a major move? Or are we reading too much into one day of buying? According to the data discussed in the source material, whales accumulated roughly 72 million XRP over the previous 24 hours. That is a significant number, especially when the broader market sentiment remains uncertain. And this is exactly where XRP investors start getting divided. One side sees whale accumulation and says they know something we don't. The other side says whales have been holding billions of XRP for years. Buying more doesn't automatically mean a rally is coming. And honestly, that second point is important. A large wallet buying XRP is not proof that the price is about to explode. Whales can have different strategies. They can accumulate gradually, reposition their portfolios, provide liquidity, or simply take advantage of lower prices. So we shouldn't turn one data point into a guaranteed prediction. But there is another reason this situation deserves attention. The whale activity is happening while the XRP ecosystem is entering a period where several major developments are converging. The Clarity Act remains a major regulatory focus, with a September 15th Senate vote target being discussed in the source material. At the same time, the SEC's decision to cancel a planned crypto rules meeting has raised questions about whether regulators could move forward independently if Congress continues struggling to finalize legislation. That creates an unusual setup. You have regulatory uncertainty. You have XRP trading under pressure. You have investors questioning whether the long-promised institutional demand is actually arriving. And then you have whales apparently adding tens of millions of XRP. That combination naturally raises the biggest question of all. What are these large holders positioning for? Because if they are simply buying a dip, then the 72 million XRP figure may eventually mean very little. But if this accumulation continues, especially while regulatory clarity improves and institutional infrastructure keeps expanding, then today's weakness could look very different in hindsight. And there is another piece of this story that XRP holders need to pay attention to. Ripple continues to describe XRP as central to its broader financial infrastructure strategy. The source material highlights Ripple payments, Ripple Prime, Treasury, Custody, RLUSD, and other initiatives as areas where the company says it wants to increase utility, liquidity, and velocity around XRP and the XRP ledger. So this isn't simply a story about whales buying a token. The real question is whether accumulation is happening before the market fully recognizes a change in XRP's underlying utility and institutional positioning. And that is exactly what we're going to break down next. Because if these whales keep buying while the market remains fearful, the next move could become much more interesting than the current price suggests. The more interesting question is what happens after the whales buy. Because 72 million XRP accumulated in 24 hours sounds impressive, but one day of accumulation doesn't automatically create a bull run. What matters is whether this becomes a trend. If large holders continue adding XRP while retail investors remain uncertain, that could create a very different market dynamic. Think about what we're seeing right now. XRP has been under pressure. Some investors are frustrated because they expected institutional adoption, regulatory clarity, and major price appreciation to happen much faster. Others are questioning whether the promised utility will actually translate into meaningful demand for XRP. And that skepticism is visible throughout the community. Some holders are asking when the heartbeat of XRP will finally start showing up in price. Others are questioning whether XRP can actually gain value beyond speculation. Those are legitimate questions, because ultimately, buying pressure has to come from somewhere. Whales accumulating tokens is one thing, but sustained demand from institutions, payment companies, liquidity providers, and users of the XRP ledger is what could make the bigger difference over time. That's why I wouldn't look at the 72 million XRP figure in isolation. I'd watch what happens next. Do whale wallets continue accumulating? Does exchange supply continue changing? Does XRP maintain important support levels? And perhaps most importantly, does actual ecosystem activity continue expanding? The source material points to Ripple's broader push into payments, custody, prime brokerage, treasury services, and RLUSD as part of its strategy to expand XRP's utility and liquidity. If those developments continue moving forward, then the whale accumulation becomes more interesting, because whales don't necessarily need everyone else to be bullish today. In fact, that's often when accumulation becomes easiest. When sentiment is weak, prices are under pressure, and retail investors are questioning their positions, larger investors can potentially accumulate without chasing a rapidly rising market. But there's an important warning here. We should not assume that every whale purchase is bullish. A whale can buy and sell. A large wallet can move XRP for reasons that have nothing to do with a future price target. And a prediction like whales bought 72 million, therefore XRP is going to $10, is simply not supported by the data. The better question is whether we're seeing a consistent pattern. One day matters, multiple days matter more, and sustained accumulation combined with improving fundamentals would matter even more. That's also why the regulatory situation deserves attention. The Clarity Act remains one of the biggest catalysts investors are watching, with the source material pointing toward a September 15th Senate vote target. If meaningful regulatory progress happens while whales are already accumulating, that could change the market's expectations. But if the legislation gets delayed again, investors shouldn't automatically assume the XRP thesis is dead. It would simply mean the market has to evaluate XRP based on utility, adoption, liquidity, and actual usage, rather than one political event. And that's where this story gets really interesting. Because the biggest question isn't whether whales bought 72 million XRP. The bigger question is, are they buying because they expect something to happen soon, or are they simply positioning for the long game? And there is one final signal we need to watch that could help answer that question. So XRP whales are buying 72 million minus something coming? The honest answer is maybe, but we don't have enough evidence to know yet. The 72 million XRP accumulation is certainly worth watching, but one day of whale activity shouldn't become a guaranteed prediction of a massive breakout. The real signal will be whether this accumulation continues and whether it happens. Alongside stronger XRP utility, liquidity, and institutional activity, for XRP holders, the next few weeks could be important. Watch the whale wallets, watch the price action, and watch the regulatory developments. But don't let one headline make the decision for you. Because if whales continue accumulating while XRP remains under pressure, that could eventually become much more meaningful. So now I want to hear from you. Do you think whales know something the market doesn't? Or are they simply buying the dip? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more XRP updates without the unnecessary hype, subscribe to Ojon XRP Insights.